Well, good afternoon. My name is Lisa MacLeod. I am the MPP for Nepean. I'm joined today by
Stéphane Sarrazin.
and my colleague.
Quinn.
He knows his name. Then we have a very, very special guest this week, a good friend of ours, a very strong voice for our region. And you're going to introduce yourself.
My name's Steve Clark from the riding of Leeds, Grenville, Islands and Rideau Lakes.
And that's a mouth.
Nicest riding in Eastern Ontario.
It's a nice riding. You do have a 1,000.
That's okay.
And together,
I throw that. I think that's right.
and together we are Sunrise Eastern Ontario, talking about politics, policy, and the things that matter to our constituents while we're at Queen's Park. So before I get started, I just need to talk to you for a minute, Mr. Blue Santa. You've been dressing up in Santa Claus gear. So how are things in the riding, and what have you been up to?
Well, I've been participating in a lot of Christmas parades, and it's all fun, but it's a lot of work. I walk in the parade. I try to catch up with the parade because, of course, give some candy canes, talk to the people. Oh, Merry Christmas! But it's all fun.
Yeah, and you're a chatty Cathy, and you do it in English and in French.
Try to.
You try to. Yeah. Bunny day. Now, Nolan, what about you? Your kids must be getting ready for Christmas, excited.
They are, yeah. And again, same as the last show, my son's got hockey every weekend, so we are constantly on the road, but lots of parades. We had one in Morrisburg, and it was raining, and I was not ready for that. But the night we had another parade, we had a nice fireplace, me and Eric Duncan, so everyone was jealous of our heat.
And I think we can all agree Eric Duncan is doing a phenomenal job, along with Michael Barrett, our guy. They're doing great.
Fantastic. Both of them are a great tag team. They do a wonderful job. And I think, there's a lot of momentum with Pierre, and I think there's going to be a good result once they go to the polls. I think all three are going to do very, very well.
Yeah, it'll make our region very, very proud to see such prominent members of the House of Commons come from our region. And I think, as we always talk about it, sometimes we feel a little left out when we're in Toronto, but certainly when their battleground is near home and their place of work is near home, you really can feel everything. So tell us, what are you up to these days? I know you've got like a zillion grandkids that you and Dee are all excited about. She recently retired.
Well, she's going to, she announced we have our Economic Development Summit. We've done it for 15 years with the county and with some employment partners. So Deanna announced at the summit that would be her last one. So she's planning on retiring in the end of January. And I know every time there's a snow day, people want her to be retired now because we've got three grandkids in the riding, 6, 4, and 2. And then we've got also 2 grandsons out in Edmonton. So lots of great things. And in fact, we just did Stéphane's talking about Christmas. We just had my very first community Christmas reception and family skate. Normally I would have a much more formal Christmas party, but the convention center in Brockville, given the housing need, just got converted into a number of seniors housing units. So we decided to go to the brand new Elaine Chartrand Community Complex in Prescott and had a great family skate. And all 3 grandkids got out in the ice from the riding. So it was really fun.
And Mila plays hockey.
Well, I think she wants to.
Oh, okay.
She certainly looks the part when she's on the ice. So we look forward to that.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. I know that you're looking at some different initiatives to bring forward here from your constituency.
Yeah, so I've had a great time to focus on the last couple months, been in the Constitute every day, responding to emails, calling.
I see it because you're my seatmate, and you're out there responding when you send emails. Much to the chagrin of your staff, you probably
be out of inbox. This really it gives you the pulse of what's going on in the riding. And, there's a lot of things, obviously, we're like every riding in Eastern Ontario. Healthcare is number 1, number 2, number 3, right? So, physician recruitment in Eastern Ontario, there's lots of competition between our ridings. And, looking forward to the government coming forward on the announcement that Minister Jones made last January about nurse practitioner-led clinics. We've had, I think, in the Southeast region, we had over 80 applications, which is very high for a geographic area. And then in my riding, I think I had 10 expressions of interest, 5 actual applications. But I just got a notice on my phone that there's going to be another doc announcing retirement soon. So again, it's a real challenge for the government to try to compete. In Eastern Ontario, we need more docs, we need more NPs, we need more healthcare workers, and all of our hospitals are working pretty hard for that. So, but you know, I keep a close relationship with all the healthcare providers in the riding, but it's still the number one issue.
Yeah.
One issue, bar none.
And would you say that's the same for you as the lack of family docs and practitioners?
Absolutely. And you know what? My spouse actually works in a family health team clinic, and we there's a list, 200 people waiting. Lucky enough, once in a while, you know, there's a new doctor coming out of university who's willing to go in the rural area, which is not always easy.
Yeah, and it's tough. And what about you, Nolan? You know, I know that you've been dealing with a couple of things in your constituency, including the illegal border crossing situation and the money that is needed for social services. And I certainly, when I was immigration minister and social services minister, had to deal a lot with that. But is that also putting a drain onto your healthcare system?
It is putting more pressure on the hospital system. Ultimately, they do have some resources out inside the dev center, but they do come to our hospitals as well. So it's putting pressure all across. But I think Steve brought up a good point. For every doctor that retires, we're not necessarily getting a new doctor coming in. So it's a lot of pressure. You know, I think a lot of the doctors want to go to the bigger city centers, and we are rural Eastern Ontario. So as much as it's the most beautiful place in Ontario, we don't necessarily have all the big city features, right, that they're looking for. So it's a challenge.
Yeah. I just wrote a letter to David Piccini, and you're going to say, why Piccini, the Minister of Labour and Immigration. But you'll not believe this. There's a family physician in Ottawa, 1,200 patients on Meadowbank. And because she is older than 45 from the UK, older than 45 and not married, Immigration Canada is denying her permanent residency. And so her visa will run out. 1,200 patients. And so I've asked Piccini, I said, buddy, I'm going to need you to get in there and talk to your federal counterpart. So today he said he was forwarding my letter, but to your points, like the nurse practitioner issue, I think is going to alleviate a lot of it. We just need to make sure that there's funding for it. And then the other thing is to make sure that those young family docs find themselves in a position to come here, because, you know, Steve and I were talking about a question period that the issue isn't so much the emergency room crowding as it used to be. I mean, it's there for sure, but it is the access to the family doctor, which is perpetuating that. But anyway, tell me more about some of the other issues that are coming up in your constituency. You got the proposed jail, maybe not jail.
Yeah. So the number one jail that I've been working on is the Brockville jail. It's 180 years old, oldest in the province. It was an expansion that was announced to the St. Lawrence Valley Treatment Center, which is the mental health treatment as part of the Royal Ottawa.
Yeah.
It was announced in 2002 that that facility would be expanded, and then when McGuinty took over, he canceled it right away. And we've been working since we've been a government in 2018 to revive that plan. And in 2020, the Premier announced a whole growth in correctional beds. The new one in Grenville, which is the most controversial one in Quinty, and then the one in Brockville, which would include mental health bed expansion at the St. Lawrence Valley Treatment Center, but also a brand new Brockville jail to replace that 180-year-old jail. That's, really,
it's about time.
It's about time. It's about time. And, I'm glad that the government made the commitment. It's just literally getting shovels in the ground, right? The Premier announced it in August of 2020, and we really got to, get closer to, starting that project, and, giving some certainty to those employees who, I've toured the Brockville jail many, many times, both when I was mayor of Brockville and when I was an MPP. I've taken countless Solicitor Generals and Ministers of Community Safety and Corrections of all political stripe through the facility, and they all agree that it needs to get done. And, I want shovels in the ground by the next election. I think the people in Brockville have been very patient, 180-year patient, and I think we just need to move forward.
Yeah. This reminds me of how good you are at your constituency work. And you were first elected in your 20s. And my daughter doesn't believe me, and I was like, "Here's curly hair." She thought it should be blonde because Kate was there calling. You were the youngest mayor in the country. You got elected and joined us here in 2010, and you are referred to as my biffle, my best friend for life. We're sort of joined at the hip, and often we've gone different places with my husband Joe and your wife Deanna, and so we're good family friends. Your daughter worked for me at one point, and so I've been able to watch you, and I see you more now than ever before, where younger members, newer members are coming up and they sit with you and they ask how to drive an agenda through, if they're a PA or not, through a ministry. You're giving a lot of advice. And we got two amazing new MPPs here from Eastern Ontario. And just before they get into asking some questions, I just wonder if you have any advice for them in some of the important areas. Like, for example, I know Nolan is working on getting Great Wolf Lodge into his constituency. Yeah, so and you're doing a lot of work on energy, Stéphane. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice for our new members on how to move an agenda forward.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to when I was mayor, right? So got elected as mayor, 22 years old, right at university, and got elected was great because we had a fairly new council, like 60% new. So we all sort of learned the job together, and it was great because we had people. I was in my 20s. We had someone in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. So we had really, all the decades sort of covered in council. But the thing that I want to impart to everyone is the fact that I did it full time. I was 22 years old. The mayor's job made like $14,000 in 1982. But I learned about serving people, right? So anybody who talks about, getting involved in politics, I always talk about learning how to serve constituents. And really, when I was at City Hall, I really got to understand the nuts and bolts of what it's like to deliver services at the curbside level, whether it's like picking up garbage or making sure that the streets are plowed or sanded or salted or paved. It's a real deliverance of service at that level. I did it when I worked for Bob Runciman, did it when I was a CAO, and then when I got elected in 2010. Government moves slower the farther up the chain you get. So, you can get stuff done at the municipal government. Stéphane was like lickety split compared to the province. So, new members have to be tenacious. They've gotta have good records. They gotta have staff that follow up. Like sometimes you can have a really good concept, a really good answer, and you just run out of time in a term, right? So we're right at the sweet spot, sort of year, just ending, going into year 2 of a 4-year mandate. So this next year is a really critical year because you don't have very many budgets left, right? And I don't count on election year as a real budget because it straddles term. So the next 2 budgets are going to be critical to deliver energy improvements, economic development opportunities, healthcare improvements. So the next 2 budgets.
416 interchange.
Yeah, so you're right. And when you've got a big project, right, the bigger the project, the harder it is to go through, because typically they don't cover one ministry. Like even the Brockville jail, it might be the Solicitor General's department, but it's ultimately got to be delivered by the Ministry of Infrastructure. So you got a whole set of different bureaucrats, different ministers' offices. So, you need to make sure you've got really good alliances. And the best advice I got were 2 women who I worked with Bob Runciman, Pauline and Lynn, who basically said at the constituent level, doesn't matter what party you are, you make friends with the MPP liaison, because they might give you an answer from within government. It's not their answer, but you have to realize that they're just giving you the answer that even if it's a political answer, even if it's an answer that doesn't address your concerns, you got to treat them with respect. And my staff have always adhered to that. It's a tough thing delivering projects for a riding. I've been pretty lucky over the years with some of the things that I've been able to get done, through the pandemic, things like, a new 3M respirator plant, a big expansion for Greenfield for alcohol that would go into hand sanitizer. So big projects in a pandemic, but it's still hard. It's still hard to deliver, and you got to be tenacious, and you got to have good people around you, 100%.
So guys, you've got the master here. Anybody question?
About that. So.
Well, I've been lucky. I've had Steve's phone number since Jimmy's retirement dinner to this been Actonel's retirement dinner. So I've been able to pick Steve's ear a little bit more than I think the rest of us. But I guess my question would be the work-life balance. You know, you're happily married. You have a young daughter that's very successful. How'd you make it work over the years? Because it's a challenge for me to balance it all.
Yeah, and so I got out of politics. I did 9 years as mayor from 22 to 31. And I got out because of that work-life balance, right? Katie would have been 1 in 1991. And I just got tired of, seeing the kids asleep in the morning when I left and seeing the kids asleep in bed when I got home. So it was an easy decision for me to walk away from politics. And I wasn't really sure what people would think about it, right? And I remember there was a Macleod's magazine in the early 90s that had a picture of some pretty impressive young politicians. Jason Kenney was on the cover, right? And he talked about how young people getting involved and being successful. I was the example of, even though you are successful, sometimes it doesn't result in a long-term career. And I was used as the poster child for, here's somebody who started young and, where the heck is he now? Well, I thought I was in a great spot because I was home with my kids and, doing hockey practice and taking kids to dance and being there for them at school. But politics, sometimes it gets looked differently, that if you don't have a long career, you're somehow not successful. That's not the case, right? You had people who have had very short, effective careers in politics that, that were able to do that work-life balance. And it is tough. You look at some of our colleagues that are in Ottawa, but it's a very quick trip from, GPR or SDNG, or even quicker from Nepean to get to Parliament Hill. We're hours away, right? And sometimes people don't appreciate the fact that, if I could commute, it would be like a 3.5 to 4 hour commute one way, right? So it's tough. You have to have, you have to have a very supportive spouse and family, and I do. But it's a tough business, right? So you've got to have some me time, and you got to be able to separate this place from back home, right? And people always, you have to reinforce that you're your riding's person in Toronto. It's not Toronto's person in the riding, and that's the big thing that you always have to remind people. Sometimes they think once you get elected, you move to Toronto. That's not the case. I've lived in Brockville, all my adult life. I don't plan on changing that anytime soon.
I think you had a good point, the supportive spouse. I just want to throw some brownie points out there. My wife is very supportive, so I'm blessed to have her. She's handling all the home front, and that is essential.
I think, when I hear most of our members, talk, what resonate to me is the fact that we're all doing this for the same reason. Because, we were all involved in our community. And like you were saying, you were a mayor, and we were talking about federal politics. I would never run for federal politics because I think, the things we do as provincial politics is closer to the people. And of course, being mayor and municipal leader, I mean, it's great. And it's the thing that strikes me the most. Everybody that is here, is doing that for their community. And one of the best, you hit the nail right in the head, because one of the best times I think I have is at the start, just before question period, when members do member statements, right? Because it's amazing some of the things that are going on in other ridings that we have no idea about until we're able to tell our local story. And that's really, I think, the best member statements are when, somebody stands up and talks about, something that's happened in the riding. It gives people recognition and gives people validation that the legislature understands the great work that's being done in all of our ridings. But you're right. I'd say the municipal level is the closest to the people, but there's still a lot of really good things we can do at the provincial level, given, health, education, transportation, some of the other ministries that are there. In my riding, tourism, right? Big issue, big economic driver. And when you get to the feds, you're just that far, removed from what I call that curbside politics, where, it affects somebody's daily life.
So I have a quick question for you, Steve, because we've served together for a very long time. We're close. We'd often carpool together back and forth to take the train. And we had one train incident Twice.
Oh, yeah, remind me about that one. So, well, that is the story now, right? So I didn't convince Lisa to take the train from Nepean because they used to have this early morning train that could get you into Toronto from Eastern Ontario in time for question, right? You could take the subway and then take the tunnel, and you could basically get to question period on time. We were in opposition. So I convinced Lisa not to fly Porter, to come via rail, and the train caught on fire. And all that. She had to walk a mile in her high heels in a snow, 6 inches of snow. Meanwhile, for me in Brockville, because I got the Ottawa, Montreal, they just stopped the train from Montreal. I got on the train, had breakfast, got to question period on time. So when Lisa came, probably like 1 o'clock, to do like an hour lead, I wasn't the top of her best friend delight list. I was way down at the bottom. So we didn't take the train for the longest time after my bright idea.
We used to hang out with Jimmy Mack quite a bit too, and Norby Sterling, and anyway. But let's. I just want to talk about Bob Rutzman because we had him on.
Yes.
Written a book. Yes. He's a longtime friend of yours. You worked for him. You actually ran against him at one point. And one of the things that we talked about was one of his more. When was his favorite time of being elected? And he talked about the minority government when and even the 4 years of it's right before they formed a government, and they became really, really close. And I kind of thought, yeah, that kind of makes a lot of sense. I found it was very intoxicating to be in cabinet for sure, but also it was that time between 2011 and 2014. I'm wondering, did you have a specific time where you look back fondly, maybe with some rose-colored glasses, but look at it and go, oh, okay, that was important to me.
Yeah, no, I think that people asked me that before, and it's not as cut and dry as Bob. Like, he really liked the third party status, the 90 to 95 when Bob Ray was in, and they really gelled as a small caucus with Mike Harris at the helm that ultimately led to the Common Sense Revolution, led to their 2 majority terms. With me, it's a little more information oriented, right? Like, obviously municipal, my first 3-year term as being mayor, as somebody who had just graduated from university, not knowing anything about politics. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And then, sort of my first year as an MPP, coming in a by-election in 2010, having that first year with, really learning the ropes around Queen's Park. And it is different, even though I worked for the member for 3 years. It's a lot different, being in the chamber, handing the member the note that it is sitting in the chair, with all the dynamics of question period and all the things around that. But nothing really after, being in opposition, the party being in opposition for 15 years and me being in opposition for 8 years. There's nothing like getting into government, right? So, and they joke, I'm sure, maybe even Bob might have said, your worst day in government's better than your best day in opposition. It really is. Like, you really have access as a government to much more resources than you do when you're in opposition. Not to say we didn't have a lot of fun, at least in opposition, because we did. But at the same time, you're able to move projects forward and get things done and do it in a way that is hard to.
Yeah, there's nothing quite like calling the premier up and saying, I need X, Y, and Z, and then, within 2 days it happens.
Yes.
Just he likes to move fast. Who have you served with in the past? I'll tell you who mine is, that you'll never forget. Like, mine is Bill Murdoch. Like, just the character that Murdoch.
I'll talk about Murdoch too, right? So Murdoch knew, and we knew each other. Bill Murdoch and I knew each other because we were both municipal councillors, right? We were both involved in AMO. And I remember having a conversation with Bill, in sort of the mid-'80s about people moving up the ladder. I was president of AMO in 1989, a year earlier, because the president, Michael Power, lost the 88 election. But we had talked a couple of years before about who was going to move up to third vice president of AMO, or like second vice or first vice, or be president. And Bill, I remember Bill like it was yesterday, right? I'll never be president of AMO. And just because it was such a character. But my best Bill Murdoch story was when I first went to Good Roads, and his county had not one, but 2 hospitality rooms. Now, granted, Good Roads isn't like this.
We just don't be up to it.
He looked at me and he says, "You want to go in the hospitality room?" I said, "Sure." He goes, "Booze or cards?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" So he opened up the one door, it was a bar, and he opened up the next door, and it was like a smoke-filled room where everybody's playing poker. I went, "I think I'm going to pass on." But I was 22. I was, a little wet behind the ears. So I said, I passed, right? But I just thought this was quite the scenario. And then later on, I get elected. They put me with Bill Murdoch. And Bill told me that you should always have a petition, especially when you're in opposition. So you always have to have a petition to rail against government. And if you don't, make one up. I didn't understand what he meant. But at one point, he's holding a blank piece of paper, and he just was freelancing. He was saying, whereas, Dalton McGuinty has broken, 75 promises in the last 75 days, and whereas the people of Ontario have given up hope, all hope, therefore be resolved that Dalton McGuinty immediately resign and call an election. And it was literally a blank piece of paper. And the clerk took it down to the speaker, and the speaker is like looking at this, like, what is this? And then he went next, because, it wasn't a certified petition. So what Bill did, this was one very smart, he took Hansard the next day. This was when Hansard came in a book, and he ripped the page out, and he read it again, and it was an answer. It was officially an answer. So I learned not the best work habits from Bill, but the one thing that he did teach me was I would never refer to a bill by number, which we're all guilty of, right? Bill 150 is up, or Bill, and every Tuesday morning he would come in, because that's when I had house duty with him, and he would say, "What are we doing?" I would say, "We're debating Bill 6. He would go speak English. And I would say, "Okay, we're doing a conservation authority bill." "Okay, no problem," because you always want me to talk about what was in the bill, because he always said nobody cares what the number is. They all care what it's going to do to them, right? So very good advice from the maverick Wild Bill.
He was he was authentic and very grassroots. So I think my 2 stories on Bill, and then I'll get the guys to chime in here. But so when I first got elected, I was same day as Christine Elliott, Bob Runciman, and John Tory walk us in to the House, and we're sitting in just behind Garfield Dunlop and now Speaker Ted Arnott. And on the side is Jerry Marknuck and Bill Murdoch. And Bill takes up his 2 front teeth, says hello to us. I mean, Garfield's telling us he's the eye candy, and poor Ted is giggling. And then he puts his teeth back in, and then he takes out a scan of his colonoscopy. And so Christine and I were like, okay. And I was young, and I was 31, and I was very, very, I was really wet behind the ears. And then the second thing was John Tory, I can't even remember why, ejected him from caucus. That the international plowing match was in his constituency, and Bill was more popular than JC himself in that riding. And Bill decided he was going to lead the international plowing match, and he had more cheers and excitement than the entire caucus and John Tory. So eventually Tim Hudak put him back in caucus, and then him and former Eastern Ontario MPP Randy Hillier then stopped the legislature for 2 days, and Bill did so wearing his kilt. So that's my Billy story for you. He was something.
You're something.
Yeah. Anyway, you guys have Clarky here.
I like to hear the best practice is to not call it by bill number, because in my first year, I'm so confused by all the bill numbers out there. So to refer to them as their title, that works well with my brain patterns.
Yeah, he really broke things down, right? Like he would always say, talk about what's the bill, don't tell me the number, and procedurally, really just his big thing was to make sure you had your fair opportunity, right? If there was a bill that affected you, get up and talk about it, and then the person who sat in front of us was John O'Toole, Aaron O'Toole's dad, right? And John had been here in the mid-90s, and John was great because he would always have a book in his desk with emails from constituents, and they would be clearly marked who was able to, disclose their name or people who wanted to remain anonymous. And it would be categorized by the bill we were debating. So if you we're dealing with an infrastructure bill. He would have, letters from mayors, letters from individuals about the importance of renewing a certain piece of infrastructure, a road or a bridge or a new facility. And I found it really interesting. And a lot of the times, he would pull common newspaper stories. So he would say to us, if you're ever stuck and you got to do a 2-minute questions and comment, just reach in my desk and grab the book. And it was really valuable for me to create my own book, right? My own book of emails from constituents, newspaper stories, radio clips, just things that I could talk about from my riding that complemented what was in the bill. And really valuable advice from both those guys that first year. That was the 2010, 2011 year that I had, and just really, really good stuff. Yeah.
They were old school.
No, thank you for all, this knowledge. And of course, it was sitting in front of me in the house, so I can borrow a minute.
So this one here grades John Yacobusti because he sits right behind.
Silent.
Well, you got to give it back to John, right? He reads everyone around him, so you got to share the love.
Yeah. Well, before we conclude, we have come from a region with rich political history. In the last couple episodes, we've been able to talk to Bob and Yak about, who sort of helped guide them. In our region, at municipal, federal, provincial level, like who was your mentor that really brought you to the cusp?
Yeah, I would say when I was in high school, I was, head of the student council with a friend of mine, and Jimmy Ault, my longtime MPP, came and spoke at our convocation. Jimmy had been an MPP for 26 years, and he was one of those guys under multiple premiers where he did a lot of different cabinet portfolios. Was very, very steady. When I was on Treasury Board, I remember seeing his face because for years he was, she used to call it then chair of the Management Board of Cabinet, which is our Treasury Board today. And then obviously Bob Runciman, because I worked for him and served as mayor when he was an MPP as well. So, Bob was an MPP for 29 years and then a senator for, almost 8. Great mentor. When I resigned from cabinet on the Monday, the Tuesday morning at 9:00, Bob came to the office, right? Came, sat down with me, gave me some great advice that I'm so glad that I followed moving forward. And, those two individuals really, shaped me. Leeds Grenville wasn't Leeds Grenville when I first became a mayor. Leeds, which was Bob, Leeds County had its own rep, and Norm Stirling was, Grenville Dundas, right? And then later Grenville Carleton. And so I was really lucky, right? When they got into government, when I was a mayor, he had, a cabinet minister, Bob Runson, cabinet minister, Norm Stirling, cabinet minister, Noble Villative. You had Claude Bennett, who was municipal affairs minister, very accessible.
Our region was very well represented for a few occasions.
Yeah, so those guys should pick the phone up. They'd call you anytime, right? Any of those members on anything. So if you had an ag question for Noble, or if you had a housing question for Claude, or and Bob and Norm, you'd see at events all the time, right? You go to Prescott, you're gonna see Norm, right? You're gonna see Bob in around all the Leeds County communities. So I was really lucky that I had really good mentors that I was able to ask questions and understand. And even after I became a member, obviously I took over from Bob, but I remember a meeting we had with our regional school boards, right? So we was with the Catholic District School Board of Eastern Ontario, the Upper Canada District School Board. I don't think the 2 French school boards were there. And I remember, it was my first meeting with Norm after being an MVP, and I marveled in his knowledge of the independent officers of the legislature, the way that portion worked. It was a really, really good eye-opening experience for me, very, very early in my term. So I've been pretty lucky with those stuff.
Then before I go, and we wrap this up, a very important person to you passed away a number of years ago, towering figure in Eastern Ontario politics, passed away much too young, but still has tremendous legacy, not only in the Conservative Party, but in your community. So I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to add about, your dearly departed friend, Gord Brown.
Yeah, so, I talked about my present MP, Michael Parrott, doing a fantastic job, going to be a big big part of Prime Minister Poilievre's government soon. Gordie Brown was one of those very special politicians. I knew him since we were kids, and we actually had talked at one point about wouldn't it be great if the two of us were the MP and the MPP, because wouldn't we really get a lot of good stuff done in Eastern Ontario? And then, lo and behold, it happens, decades later. Gordie was one of those very special politicians who was able to have friends, in multiple legislatures in Ontario, legislatures in the United States as well. Really, cut above the way you represent people. I think he was really looking forward to sort of his next chapter as a legislator, as an MP, when, we got the call just before our election in 2018 that he was going to pass away. And, you always try to learn from people. And I think one of the things I've tried to do the last 5 years since we are in government is try to take a page from Gordie, just be honest, open with people. When you make a mistake, admit it. But when you got a good project in your riding, you got to fight for it as hard as you can. And it's nice to have a Gordie's memory on my shoulder when you're up. He was a really good guy, and he left us way too soon, way too soon.
Well, guys, this concludes our time together today, and I know that you might have a few parting messages.
Well, I just want to say the same thing. You were lucky to have those mentors. I think Stéphane would agree with me. We're lucky to have the two of you in Eastern Ontario to be able to show us the ropes. There's a lot to learn here, and we've been able to glean a lot of information off the two of you, and I'm very blessed to have you both. Thank you.
Thank you. Derek. Anything you want to add there?
Same better. Yeah.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes this episode of Sunrise Eastern Ontario. Of course, the sunrise is first in our region, and that's why we want to bring you some bright spots of our week and what's ahead of the next. We want to say thank you to Steve Clark, the MVP for Leeds, Grenville, 1,000 Islands, Rideau Lakes. Did I get it?
Long name, amazing service.
Very, very, very good. I used to be beside a first choice haircutters, and they would say, they'll cut your hair, I'll cut your taxes. And of course, Nolan Quinn from Stormont, Dundas, Glengarry, and of course, Glengarry, Prescott, Russell's own Stéphane, Sarrazin, also known as Blue Santa. Until next time, thanks very much for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.